that's an idea. Now that's an idea. Now that's an idea. Now that's an idea.
Kia ora, and welcome to Now That's an Idea. This is the show where we explore good ideas, and I'm your host, Jack Marshall. We're kicking off this season with a bit of a special one because it's voting time here in Tairāwhiti. We've got some candidates who want to get into power, but a lot of them make vague statements like, we're going to keep rates low and I'm going to listen to the people. But what are they actually planning? What do they hope to do? And how would they do it? So this is the show where we're going to dive into their idea and they're going to tell us what they want to do and how they're going to do it. So you can get a better idea of their thinking and if they've actually got some good ideas or they might need to think a bit harder. All right, let's interview some candidates. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the show and, kicking things off. But before we kind of get into your big idea, do you want to just tell the people of Tairāwhiti and the potential voters out there a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Hi, everyone, and hi, Jack. I'm Ian Allan. Now, I'm conscious that I've been to a couple of events recently, and I've been rattling off a 1-minute spiel or a 2-minute spiel, and also that I've got a website that's actually laying out a lot of detail. So I don't want to rattle off that usual spin.
Yeah,
So
fair enough.
I'm Ian, and I grew up here. Mum and Dad are still here. Went to Campion College, St Mary's, did that thing, and then did the natural thing of going beyond the gorge to continue my education. Interestingly enough, now I'm at EIT, wishing that our young people didn't go beyond the gorge for their education. But I ended up in
what are you teaching there at EIT?
I teach across business and computing, which really lines up with my career. Was about 25 years, 20 years prior to coming back to Gisborne. I came back in about 2021 after a year cruising around in a caravan. We called it our COVID caravan. It just ended up being coincidental timing that we decided to go and live on the road for a year, and then COVID came along. And so we were largely in blissful self-isolation, finding places to park each day. But prior to that year, I was up in Auckland and spent my career in and around software and technology, and a lot of time in pretty high intensity, high capital startup type of organizations. One of which all our work was outside of New Zealand. So we were solving really difficult technology problems in Africa and Southeast Asia and places there where our technology just didn't apply in developed markets. Same in the Pacific Islands. We did some really neat things for the Pacific Islands so that, for example, you could, up in Auckland, obviously there was a lot of Pacific Island workers that have moved over for work when their families back home in Tonga and places. So we designed and patented actually some technology that allowed them to walk into the dairy, thumbprint, and immediately send money to their family, and it would land on their mobile phones. And that was, I don't know when that was, 2010 or something. Yeah. We were still dreaming of this sort of technology here, but we were using it to solve problems there. And I think it was just interesting that my whole career in that sort of product solving space was usually the flashiest technology was not the right technology. And sometimes no technology is the solution. And it's something I often think about, and my career was kind of in products is really useful because you're spending as much time thinking about your market and your people as you are looking back into the business. And so you become a bit of a conscience and a critic of the business and the market. And someone could be saying, why aren't they buying our product? And they just don't get it. And you'd be like, well, we don't have the right product for them.
It's a bit like those, like the kind of Google and Apple VR headsets. Like absolutely, like probably some of the most amazing technology that's ever been created on Earth. But it's $3,000 and like, what, it's going to make your Zoom call better or something like that? Like,
yeah.
Possibly there's a use for it in the the future, but right now I don't really need that.
Yeah, so that's a line I picked up recently was this idea of falling in love with the problem and not the solution. And I came to learn that the hard way as well in my career. There were times where I'd invest heaps of my energy and creativity into a particular solution. And when you do that for too long, you get really resistant to a different opinion because you've invested so much energy into it. And if somebody says, I don't think that's quite right, you want to assume they're wrong.
Like sunk cost fallacy or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
You're
yeah,
just you're all in, and you're like, I can't.
yeah. And you start complaining that they just don't understand. But
Yeah. The
you know,
customer's the problem.
yeah, yeah. And it's a similar thing with these big VR headsets and Zuckerberg's desire for the metaverse and things. They fell in love with their solution, but the underlying problem is still there.
We've got to
People.
find a
Well, they
problem.
don't even know if it had a problem.
And so, what was the jump from working at EIT and working in software to going, I think it's time to stand for council?
So I suppose this whole time I've been quite politically aware, but never deeply politically aligned. I've tried being a member of some political parties, but then it always feels too partisan, which means you've always got to cheer for your team regardless of what they're saying and doing. And oftentimes you're thinking, I don't think it's a very good idea, or you're thinking their idea over there is actually pretty good. And so I've always found that difficult, but I've always been sort of very aware of, say, the political economy, you could call it. And I remember maybe earlier in the 2000s, things like income inequality became like quite a big deal. We had things like Occupy Wall Street, and there was a sense that, hey, this is getting out of hand here. The inequality is actually getting quite damaging. But then it all faded away, I suppose. The media and the big funders managed to take that off the public table. But inequality didn't improve, and it's just gotten worse and worse and worse ever since. And I don't look at it from a position of envy as though I want to have what they have. I just think the ordinary worker and even the middle class is just getting squeezed by this. And while I think of that as a very macro problem, that increasingly our families are getting poorer and even our governments are getting poorer, and we're just seeing services and everything getting worse around us, I just thought, well, I either sit here and wallow in it and get mad about it and wonder about my children and what they're going to have, or I just try and maybe there's something we could actually do at a local level.
Mm. Well, I think that ties in quite nicely, because we're going to talk about your kind of idea for Tairāwhiti, because basically the way this kind of pitch came about, my idea was having a good way to actually see what candidates would do if they could champion a specific thing if they got into power. Because obviously you're only one voice in a group of many, and
Yeah.
council only has so much power and responsibility. But I think it's good for voters to know what you would want to champion and maybe how you would do it. So I think that's can be quite telling for, some people have had some good ideas, and I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. And some people don't have, like, even though I've asked them for an idea, haven't quite even come up with an idea. So it can be quite telling. So
Yeah.
have you?
So, as I said earlier, fall in love with the problem, and it's a pretty horrible problem to have fallen in love with, this problem of pretty flat, median to falling incomes. And if we look at anything from our retail economy, our hospitality, and all of these things, ultimately we have a problem of low disposable income in this region. And those are especially relative to the cost of housing and even the availability of housing. And those are long, nuggety problems to solve. And it's probably not the one big idea I want to talk about today because it's meaty and it could easily be thought of, well, you're not going to do anything about that in 3 years. You're not going to solve the affordable housing crisis in the region in 3 years. But it is something we need to make a start on.
Most definitely.
And I know the idea of doing whatever we can to increase housing supply freaks out some property owners and investors because they worry about the price of their own home. Just segue a moment. If we look at Christchurch post-earthquake, they had a tragic housing problem, and they really fell in love with that and built untold houses. Quickly became the most affordable place to buy a house in the country, and they attracted thousands of bright young families to the region, and now it's absolutely humming. It's like they managed to disconnect from our really property-oriented economy quite a bit, and they've become a really diversified, productive economy. And that's where I think we need to go here as well. We've got to have more affordable housing because it attracts people to the region. It's an awesome story to tell. And then those people go on to build businesses, spend their more disposable income, invest themselves into high-skilled work in our industries. It all flows on. But that's a huge idea, so I'll settle on one big idea, and it's our environment centre. I don't know if you know our environment centre on Palmerston Road.
Most definitely.
So I would love to see a pretty significant expansion in both their presence and their capability. Something we saw on the road actually down in central Otago. We lived a summer down there in our caravan, and they've got this thing called Waste Busters, and they had one in Alexandra and they had one in Wanaka. I think it started in Wanaka, and it's just become this brilliant local resource reuse and repurpose hub, to the point where people think, I'm going to go there before I go to the warehouse or Bunnings or Briscoe's or the big box or whatever. And it ultimately changes this mindset about being way more resourceful, being way less wasteful. And you can sort of imagine it kind of combines an op shop with a secondhand hardware store with a leftover building supplies space, and it's often attached in some way to the waste management of the place anyway. And I just think it would be a really neat to get that happening here. It's an example of not necessarily having the riches here yet, but being able to live rich lives. And so there's a real sense of well-being and community that comes out of these sorts of things, and that old adage of someone's trash is someone else's treasure, that sort of thing. Because I see we have, what do they call it, secondhand Sundays, but they don't really work, because the secondhand Sunday doesn't necessarily happen to be the Sunday that you need a couple of extra lengths of timber or an old hoe to go and finish the job that you're working on.
Yeah.
And so we've seen them with old sports equipment, old vanities, all sorts of things.
Well, that's funny. I've actually just discovered almost what you're talking about here in Auckland. I'm speaking to you from Auckland right now, and West Auckland, there's there's in Wellington as well. They got like a tip shop. Yeah. So they just, I guess, people working just fish out good things, or people drop them off at the tip shop before they go to the waste area.
Yeah.
You're right. There's plenty of times I've just bought a house and I've been emptying it and getting rid of stuff, and half the time you'd like to, polish everything and give it to an op shop, but half the time op shops don't want it or something, and there's just kind of barriers in the way.
Yeah. I mean, it can't become just a pile of absolute junk either, because then it's no longer useful. But when you think about the amount of construction timber that ends up going to waste because it's got some nails in it and no one's going to denail it. But there's jobs, not necessarily jobs, but even volunteers for, say, the retired or the youthful, to help prep things, help repurpose things. Yeah, I would love to see that happen. And even interestingly, from a technology perspective, we've actually been exploring some ideas here. And I was almost going to embark on a project with one of our interns that was around reviving older laptops and giving them an extra few years life, and potentially creating a community hub to make use of computers for those that don't have easy access to them with good Wi-Fi. I even thought, the Environment Centre it's a natural extension for that, because a lot of people bring their old monitors and their old computers there because they don't know what to do with them. And there's actually quite straightforward means to give them a good another 3 years.
And not to mention, I don't know if you know about this company. I think it's based around Sydney, but they're going global, called Mint. And they are basically a recycle. They're probably not called a recycle company, more like a metal and mineral company that you put in motherboards and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And motherboards are full of like gold and rare.
Yeah. All the rare earths we need.
All the rare earths.
Yeah.
So they're a for-profit company that takes in electronic waste and starts making substantial amounts of money out of what people were throwing away. So there's a good argument to be made that we could turn the waste management facility, if you're thinking about it, like it's just resources being dumped that with a bit of thought and effort could be turned into money.
Yeah, and the fact I know some other council candidates are thinking about this as well, is that at the moment we're just trucking all our rubbish out of the region. And it's just a classic example of kicking the can down the road or making something someone else's problem. Because I have this real thing about when we're not really paying for the externalities, or a business or a corporation's not really paying for the externalities of what they're doing. And that can be as simple as the amount of fast food rubbish piling out of rubbish bins here. Ultimately, the public's paying for that. Yeah. And I just think there are ways of incentivizing those that are causing that externality to cover those costs.
Yeah, and like right now we're like we do trash by volume. So you put out a bag or something like that, or it could be done by, I think. Well, actually, I guess probably they're supposed to have stickers on them, so maybe it is kind of weight based, but I think it's pretty loose. So it could be it could be other ways to reduce waste. And you can think about reducing waste not just as a greeny thing, but it costs money to get rid of waste.
Yes.
Like it's just a financial thing that it's better if there's less waste.
Yeah. Whether people like it or not, a lot of what the Greens stand for, maybe usually 10 years after they stood for it, it becomes accepted.
Yeah.
And dealing with waste is becoming one of those things. Like the long talk about we've got to reduce the amount of stuff we're consuming that ends up in landfills. And it's often because you're not really feeling the externality of that stuff. But when you look at the waste management bill for our council, it's a massive expense. And the only way to reduce that expense is to reduce the amount of waste.
Yeah. Well, or just the fact that not everything is recyclable. Like, I know there's probably can't quite do that from council, but just things like that, you think it's kind of mental. But so how would you, if you were to be specific, what would this involve for the environment centre and connecting the waste centre? How would you actually do it? What would be your first step?
Yeah, so ultimately they would need a bigger site, and it probably needs to align with what the longer term intention is for the waste management area. And maybe there'd be some pushback around moving down to where the waste management is. But I can't help but think they're so constrained in their little space there. So it would be exploring other places to establish themselves.
So potentially moving it to the industrial area close by.
Yeah.
And that's the same as.
But that's a fair question. I need to do more digging into that.
Yeah. Well, in West Auckland, they've got the tip shop is right next to the waste management area.
Yeah, I think I've been out there before.
You go to the tip shop, and then you kind of first you pass by an area where you can like just drop off stuff, and they will process it, and then you go to the waste. So it's kind of really like it makes it a workflow. And makes it easier. Takes away barriers to actually recycle things.
It's like one of those old coin filters that the banks used to have, and ultimately shakes and shakes and shakes and shakes until there's not much that actually ends up in the tip.
Yeah, and so do you think it's like realistic and possible with the timeline? How soon do you think this could be implemented?
Yeah, that's without yet being a councillor, I would like to say it can be done, but if I was already a councillor, I might be saying you got no chance of getting anything done in that time frame. But I know I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one that's thinking along these lines, and maybe it's one of these things that also everything gets so politicized at the moment, and you come up with an idea, you start talking about ideas like this, and people say you're some sort of greeny hippie, I don't know, no consumption sort of person, but when it comes down to the brass economics of it, it could actually save us money. And so I don't know, you've got to get that buy-in for it to happen, and I think I'm pretty persuasive.
So potentially working with some other stakeholders and councillors first before diving in.
You've got to build up you got to sort of, someone says you've got to win the argument, well, not so much the argument, you've got to have convinced that it's the right thing to do before you have to get into all of the specifics of it. Because if you start with the specifics, there's always a way to say, oh, that's not going to work, that's not going to work.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm sold on this.
Yeah, but I've got some more thinking on the actual how to do it.
Don't we all?
But we would benefit from it.
All right. So now that we've done the idea, do you want to give your kind of pitch to the people about why they should be voting for you, to get into council? Because obviously it's not just your idea, but there's more to give.
Yeah, there's a couple of things, I suppose. The first is that I'm really not looking at this as me competing versus other candidates. I know that sounds silly. I'm trying to get selected on the team, and I've got my favourite candidates as well. And so I just want to be seen as someone that would be really valuable on that team. And that can mean that I don't necessarily agree with some of the others on the team, but it's good to have both of those views at the table. So long as we go into that in good spirits to be collaborative and work as a team. And I think I'm a really good reasoner. I've proved that in my long career. Go all in on understanding a problem to then figure out what is the most pragmatic way that we can address this problem. And I really want to be seen as promoting the council as an enabler, as some others do, and also increasing its risk appetite. Whatever we can do to support the council to increase its risk appetite, to continue to try things and give things a go, and being okay and trying to convince the public that it's okay, that you can make a mistake and we can learn from it and do it better next time. Because I really worry that extreme risk aversion just means that good things don't happen, because we can always find a reason not to do something. But just like me deciding to stand for council, of all the good reasons not to do this, I found better reasons to do it anyway. And that's really associated with risk appetite.
Yeah. Well, like I said to another candidate, it's the difference between leading and representing. You got to have that both elements to a candidate, really. Or
yeah. So I do think I've proven myself in my career as having a very broad skill set and being able to turn ideas into actuality.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for catching up. Before you go, I do have pop quiz for you.
Yeah.
Favorite fish and chip shop in Tairāwhiti?
The Aberdeen Road fish and chip shop.
Classic. Do you have a favorite Lord of the Rings character?
No, I've blown my campaign.
No, it's actually not. This has been a bit of a dud question so far.
Hey, one thing, I'll never forget, I was in New York and I had just arrived and I went into a little local bar and I said I was from New Zealand and I was all set to say, Lord of the Rings. And they said, Flight of the Conchords. And I thought, yes, we've got over Lord of the Rings.
Not me. Right, next movie-related question. Whale Rider or Boy?
Whale Rider. That makes me bawl my eyes out.
Oh yeah, so far I think I've got 4 for Whale Rider, 0 for Boy. And Māori awards, yes or no?
Yes.
And some people find winter a bit difficult in Tairāwhiti with boredom, which is a bit grey. What's your secret sauce for getting through winter in Tairāwhiti?
You got to still get out there and feel the fresh air or the rain on your face. And Kiwa Pools has been a blessing for our place for the winter.
And final question, paua pie, yay or nay?
Yay. I know the one you mean.
Yeah.
Tokomaru.
Yeah.
The pork
Well,
belly one's pretty good too.
That's hard, but it's expanding though. There's more and more people starting the paua pie.
Yeah, but there's only one original, Tokomaru.
Yeah.
Now that's an idea.